combine small town roots with business savvy, and you've got the Rural Rundown podcast. We're sharing our marketing and branding strategies, tips, and tricks that rural businesses can use to educate, inspire, and entertain their customers, and to help you make sales and hit profit goals. So what does it take to go from your mom is your only fan to famous in a small town? Tune in and listen up as we feature business owners and organizations that are doing big things in their community and creating opportunities for generations to come.
Welcome back to another episode of Rural Rundown. Brenna, what's hanging over there in Arizona?
Oh, it's nice and the sun is shining. It's starting to get hot though, so I think it's gonna get hotter and hotter as we go on from here. So we'll see how I last through the summertime of Arizona.
Yeah, that's going to be interesting to, 'cause you've never lived, well, you've lived down there in the summer, sort of that.
So South Texas and Oklahoma, we've been there in the summertime, and I will tell you, it is humid as heck in both of those places. So I really do think we can handle it. It's been up to like 97, and I'm maybe up in the hundreds here in Phoenix already. And I'm like, dang, like if I can handle 100 degrees, I think I can be good, because it's different. I hate to be like the dad, like, well, it's a dry heat, but it really is. It's way different.
Huh. Yeah, here in Minnesota, it's April for anyone who's referencing this later. The grass is finally green. So things are looking up and I'm excited. I'm excited for spring, summer, everything. So today we're going to be talking about branding, and we're all going to be talking about do-it-yourself branding, and then also going a little deeper into why would you build a brand? Why is it important? Kind of the different aspects of it. So are you ready to jump in?
I am. I'm excited for today's conversation.
So Brenna is our branding expert. So I'm going to be asking her some questions. My first one is, Brenna, when you're talking to clients and kind of sharing why branding is important, what do you say to them?
So branding for a company is like a reputation for a person, right? It's so much more than just having a logo or just having this sign in the front of your business or using the same colors and say, well, now I'm branded. So much more goes into that. So it's important for a lot of aspects of your business, for marketing and advertising, customer service, getting new clients, using referrals to get clients. All of these things play into how well branded your business is. And really it all comes down to like people don't buy from like businesses because they like the name of the business or it's something there. People buy from people, and they buy from places that make them feel good and make them feel like they want to go shopping there again or have that experience again. So really there is so much that goes into a brand. It's kind of like overwhelming to grasp or like get the concept of if you're just starting or you feel like I don't even know where to begin. But really I think that's an interesting way to put it, that branding for a business is really just like reputation for a person.
Yeah, I mean, I think about some of the businesses that I love around here, and when I think about them, I like either, kind of think, oh, I get a warm feeling, a welcoming feeling, because that is part of a brand, is how you make people feel, not only when they're with you in person, but when they maybe see you on social media or your website, or like you said, if they're sending you things in the mail, it's all connected. And it's like how you feel, the vibe, everything.
Yeah.
So,
And a lot of times you can feel that when you buy like clothing from a certain store, right? When you put it on then and how it makes you feel or what you think about that clothing store before you even purchase. That's like a very tangible way to think about branding and see how in your own life, how different brands affect you.
yeah, that's great. So, for someone who's, maybe thinking, I need to think a little bit more about my brand or even starting a brand, and they want to do it themselves, give me some feedback.
I think the first thing to do is like really sit down and ruminate on the idea of why you want to do it yourself. Like, why are you in this position that you think that doing it yourself is going to be better for your business or that you need to do it for your business? Whatever that is, so you can kind of figure out like, am I just doing it to save money and like cut costs? Or am I doing it because you're like a control freak and you need to hold on to every part of your business? Or is it because that's something you really enjoy? For my business, and I think you're the same way, Rach, that like that's something we enjoy is like doing graphics and creating those things. So it makes sense for us to brand our own businesses. However, with that said, last year when I was going through a rebrand, it took me a long time to get to the point where I found the what I was looking for. I really considered reaching out to a different brand designer and being like, "Hey, I need somebody else to take this over. I'm not like at the place I want to be. I'm not hitting it." And it really just kind of came overnight that I was like, "Yep, that's it. That's what I need." And I really do like I've kind of like slipped into a new place where I feel really comfortable in my branding and like what it says to customers. And I've had a lot of people come back and say a lot of different things that I'm like, perfect, I'm hitting it like spot on. And I wasn't feeling that at all in the original brand that I had created for my business.
Yeah, it really does kind of take, it's like, when it doesn't fit or when it does. And I
Yeah.
think we all know that when we're setting up a business, whether it's, I mean, I think too, sometimes when businesses get taken over, new owners come in,
Hmm.
they maybe that's when kind of we see rebrands because they
Yeah.
know maybe this has changed or this is the new us. I
Yep.
mean, it is kind of, and it can change. I think that's a good thing to put in here
Mhm.
is you can start with something but allow it to change if it does so over time. Because I think sometimes we think, oh, it has to be absolutely perfect. I can't mess this up. It can't be wrong. When we hold something so tight like that, we'll never move forward to even get version one out.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. And I was reading something the other day about going through a rebrand and like when do you think it's the right time to rebrand? And a lot of times that comes when you're actually changing your services, or you're changing your location, or like you said, new people take it over. And that's kind of where it was in my business, right? Is that I moved, we kept doing the travel life, the RV life, and I was changing my services a little bit. So it was just time to like just like gather that all together. A lot of people, every time they offer a new product, they feel the need to like rebrand or change what they're doing. And sometimes that just means that you have a new product suite, and that product can have its own graphics. It can have its own identity outside of kind of under the umbrella of your same business. So, yeah, if you sit down and you think about like, why do I really feel like I need to brand? You kind of sort those things out to be like, okay, I really feel like I need to cut costs, or I need to like save money, or you're deciding like it's just something you need to hold on to and you need to do. But branding isn't for everybody, and graphic design isn't for anybody either. And that's part of what plays into it, right? When you're building a brand is the elements, the logos and the graphic side of things. And I think a lot of people just think like, okay, well, I'm gonna build a logo and I like flowers, so it should have a flower in it. And I'm a girl and I really like this font, so that's what it's gonna have in it. And I like these colors, like blue, pink, and purple. Those are kind of my favorite colors, so that's what I'm gonna have because that really like emulates who I am as a person. When really what branding entails is a lot of behind the scenes, like thinking about color psychology, how it makes people feel, what you want your customers to be drawn to, what you want your customers to think about when they see your business or see your logo or see the services that you provide. And I think that gets overlooked often when we DIY our brands because we're so focused on what we like or what we've seen other people do that we like. And we're not considering like what we're doing for our business. Like, really, when it comes down to branding, it's for your business, it's not for you. It has nothing to do with you. It's for your business and it's for your customers that you want to attract.
yeah, those are some good points. I'm even taking notes because I'm like, this needs to be in our episode notes. So, okay, with all of that, say there's a person who this is brand new to them and they're not quite ready to even talk to a brand designer yet because they don't understand any of this. Are there some steps? I know you already said the one question, why do you want a brand? But are there some other questions they should ask themselves to get started to kind of help them get something going? And then if they do want to decide to bring it to a brand designer or continue on their own, what should they do? What should they be asking themselves?
Yeah. First of all, I think like sitting down and figuring out like who you are, what you do, and why you do it. Those are three things that I will say and help people with in so many facets of what we're doing. But really, when you're thinking about branding your business, really thinking about it and kind of honing in and figuring it out what it is that you do and who you're trying to connect with. Because like I said, a lot of this isn't for you, it's for your clients that you want to attract. So that's kind of the first thing. The other step that I have people take, in the first step, is doing a SWOT analysis. So if you're unfamiliar with doing that, that's a strength, weakness, threats, and opportunities. For anybody that's going to watch our video, this is what it looks like. So if you break it into 4 quadrants, you can see what your strengths are, your weaknesses, your threats, and your opportunities. From there, again, it's kind of just more of this who you are, what you do, why you do it. But then it helps you kind of decide, okay, this is where, like, if this is the weakness of your business, here's how we're going to kind of like use one of your strengths to not hide or cover up, but kind of like, stand your business up on, right? So that's going to be like your foundation of figuring out what's going on there. And once you get to that point, again, like, just thinking about this branding and thinking about how your business uses their strengths in different places, and what threats are we trying to avoid, or threats that we're trying to overcome, even in business, whether that's a competitor or one of your weaknesses can certainly become your threat. And then the next thing that I think you should really do before you even think about designing a logo or thinking about graphics or colors or anything is really sitting down and figuring out your goals and looking ahead to your 5-year goals, and then taking a step back and looking at your goals for this year. So what are the steps that you're going to take, and what are the goals for this year that are going to help you get to your 5-year goals? And then even breaking it down quarterly or monthly and saying, okay, what are my goals this month so I can make it to my year goals, so I can make it to my 5-year goals. And once you kind of do all of those things, it really starts to like pave the way and start the path to open everything else up for you. And once you really sit down and think about these things, and we're not doing a business plan here, coming up with like some full, like, this is what's going to happen, but really just like ruminating on some of this stuff and thinking about where you want your business to go and how you want it to get there, because all of that is going to play into your brand voice or your imagery that you're using, or even the type of logo that you're going to create. It all starts there.
Yeah. So one thing that popped into my mind when you were talking about the SWOT analysis is I think when we do the work of actually writing those things down and thinking about it, we can figure out what's really different about our business or our product or our service. And like, as you said, that becomes part of your messaging where you're tying into your whole brand. And I think sometimes we forget about that step because we're just so excited about the idea or the product or the service, and we think so granularly when it has much more of an impact when we can like dump it all out, see the big picture.
Yeah.
So what do you think, what are some like missteps in branding or things people should maybe stay away from?
Oh, I think a lot of these come from like the visual side of it. When people are like thinking about their visual brand, which is, the graphics, the logos, the colors, the fonts, stuff like that. Um, People are going with things that are trendy. And right now, what we're seeing as trendy is something that's like very interesting. I actually saw somebody create a post and thinking about doing something kind of the same, to be like, if these brands, these big brands like Nike and Apple and even Microsoft, if they went with the things that were on trend at the time, what they would look like now is mind blowing. Because it is, we see a trend and we fall into this thing that, oh, this is what so and so is doing, or you follow a designer that you're considering using and you see that all of their stuff is on trend with what else is happening in the world. Then you kind of fall into that trap where you're like, okay, this is what's trendy right now. This is what I'm going to use. And then, within a year, it goes out of style and then you're left in the dust. So I think that's a pretty popular mistake step that people take, is that they really go after the visual side of things, thinking that that's the most important, and they fall short. because they're not doing the work behind the scenes, and because they're not, like I said, like if you're not a graphic designer, that's okay, hire it out. They're not well versed in what needs to be done. And it's kind of like me being like, well, stitches, they look easy enough. I could probably stitch myself up. I'm not a nurse, I'm not a doctor. I don't know the first thing about stitching into myself and stitching my skin together. That's probably not something I'm going to even attempt. And I think that for some reason we don't think the same way about branding and graphic design, and I think that's unfortunate.
Wow, yeah, that's so true. Um, Question for you. What's trendy right now in branding that you think won't be in here in the next few years?
Um, this, and I think this plays on the nostalgia that we had talked about in an episode, 2 episodes ago. Um, we see a lot of like almost 70s type trends where it's very groovy, a lot of florals, a lot of like funky stuff happening. In gradients, we're seeing weird gradients, like neon toned almost gradients. Um, those I think are going to go out of style within the next 9 months, I would say. I think it's like something trendy now, but I don't really see why it's trendy. And I see people like yesterday, I was at the grocery store, and the grocery store has a Starbucks in the front. And so I was looking at one of the signs while we were in the self checkout, and I was like, it just looks so ugly. And it's just trying so hard to be on trend with what's happening instead of just being itself. And really, like, it was for a couple of drinks that they were advertising. And it's like, why don't you make a visual like brand, almost, a separate brand or a separate like um family for these drinks, rather than just trying to like be what's trendy, you know like it just almost seems like it just doesn't fit. um Trying to think of what else I see right now that's like really just trendy and won't stick around for a while. Um, that's probably the most. The gradients that gets me every time too, and very weird like single line um, geometric shapes, which really remind me of like the Jetsons. I'm like, I don't know why we're at this point, but here we are.
I have this question for you. So, a good brand, like Nike, Apple, like you said, they stand the test of time, but I would also say they've evolved.
Mhm.
How can you create a brand that will stand that test of time and we're not going to like look back in 10 years at your website and think, oh wow, this is aged? Because I'm sure you've done this, I've done this, you're looking around in like different industries and you're like, yeah, that's a website from 2010. Like you can just tell.
well, I think it's important to just keep up with what's happening. Like, it's one thing to not design your entire brand around what's trendy, but to keep up with the trends and to keep up with what's going on. Um, so websites are a perfect example of wanting to stay on brand and keeping it up to date with your brand as it changes, but also just keeping up to date with technology and the new changes that are happening in society, right? So we look at these, and really when we think about it, I think we've talked about this before. It was 2012 before I got my first iPhone. Like, we can tell these websites that are happening, that were created in 2010, 2015, even, because technology has made massive steps in a very like short time. So it's important to keep up with what's going on and to really evolve with that stuff. Like, your brand, your logo doesn't have to change. And really, when you think about your brand and what's behind it, your reputation that you have, that won't change. Just because the visual elements are changing doesn't mean your entire brand's changing. You're just keeping up with what's happening and what's going on. And I mean, we see that in Apple, really, when we think about technology and what's cutting edge. We're looking at Apple, we're looking at Tesla, we're looking at some of these big companies, and they're keeping us on our toes, and they're evolving with it, ever evolving the same way.
Yeah, it's innovation. Yeah, they always are cutting edge. So, okay, so that makes me, so when we're thinking about like researching, we kind of touched on this a little bit because you said you don't want to have to be like just doing a trend to do it, but what would you recommend for some people who want to do some research first before they start building their brand? Like, are there places they should look or things they should do?
The first thing I think you should do when you're talking about research is like researching your audience and figuring out what that demographic is. And I say this because like that really dictates what our brand will become as well. So the first thing you do is really like figure out, hone in on who your audience is. And I recommend to people, and what I do with my clients is ask them to focus on one person. Like seriously focus on a single person and create this person, like create them in your head, give them hair color, give them an eye color, give them a name even. What do they like to do in their free time? What's their family like? Like who are they? And once you figure that out, then again, you get to this point where you're like everything seems to open up and you're like, okay, this is the person, this is what they like, this is the kind of messaging they would like to hear, this is the kind of product they would like to buy. And then it's everything seems to be like, okay, you can like figure this out and it can become a little bit better. So I have some in my brand book, I have some like demographics to consider, and this is why I think like researching your audience is so important, is to come up with some of these demos. So looking at like age, right? So the age 45 to 54 is the group of people that spends the most time on Facebook, more than any other age group. So when we're thinking about our brand and if it will be a digital brand versus the other thing to think about too is like where we're going to use our visual elements, right? So our logos and stuff. So is it going to be like digital and we're going to do most of our advertising on social media, and so we're going to use Facebook, or is it going to be like billboards, people driving down the road? So how does our brand kind of like transpire between a digital asset versus a tangible asset like a billboard? And thinking about age is one of those things where you're like, okay, if I want to hit this age group of 45 to 54-year-olds, I'm going to use Facebook advertising, which means it has to be digital based, right? I have to think about that stuff when I'm designing. Thinking about income level, buying power. Right now, U.S. Hispanic millennials have 1.5 trillion in annual spending power, and in 2020, the global spending power of baby boomers reached 15 trillion. Like again, like thinking about age, thinking about how much money these people have, education level, race and ethnicity. In 2013, the median household of net worth by race was 192,000 for whites, 19,000 for blacks, and 23,000 for Hispanics. So if when we really get down to the base of it and think about who our audience is, then we can start researching some of these demographics and figuring out who's going to be purchasing from us, who's going to be looking at our brands, and again, designing a brand and building a brand strategy for the people who are going to be buying from you. That's really the best research that I think you could do when you're starting to build your brand.
Awesome. Do you I had written down some of the different things that I think of when I think about branding. I think about logo, colors, kind of the vibe or your voice, the tone. What is there a certain way or order you should think about your brand when you think about those together, or do you have any tips specific to each of those things?
Usually when I'm designing the visual side of brands, it all comes together at once almost. Because I've done the strategy part of it, thinking about who we're trying to target and what we want them to feel. So then it kind of goes into everything else. So when I'm designing logos for clients, I start with a black and white. I never use color because color changes the way people view things. If it's a color that they don't like or it's a color that they do really like, they're going to choose it based on that just because of the color. So everything starts in black and white, and it's really just based um, on who we're trying to attract and what we're trying to say with this graphic element, with these visual elements that people are going to be seeing. So I actually start a lot of my stuff with visual and audible. This is like weird, but I found that this works really well for me. When I'm designing stuff, I listen to different types of music that are going to fit with the brand. So again, that feel, that emotion that you want your clients to feel, I listen to stuff like that, and it kind of gets me like sways me in a place where I feel creative to create something that reminds me of what I'm listening to. But I do the same thing with visuals too. So we really start with a Pinterest board that I invite clients to, and we find these photos, and we try to stay away from logos and what that stuff looks like, but really just with photos. Like when you see this picture, what do you feel? What do you think of? Is that reminiscent of what you want to happen in your brand? And a lot of times it's just simple pictures. Like I just worked on one for a client. They're creating a boutique that's athleisure wear for rural women, and one of the photos that they used were just of like backpackers in the mountains, and another photo was like this group of girls on the beach, and then another photo was just a set of beach chairs and an umbrella at the beach. But all of these things are making us feel like, travel inspired, and hanging out with the girls and spending a girls night with the girls, and just all of these things that you feel. That's what we want the brand to feel like too. So that's kind of where it starts for me, is getting yourself to that emotional side of things, so that you can get into that creative piece where you're like, and like people, as you change regions, like say you're from the south and you move to the north, you know how your accent changes because you're like forming with the people that are there. That's what I'm doing when I'm trying to create a brand, right? Is forming with the emotions that I'm feeling and the vibes that I'm going for, which really help me create. And then when it comes to colors and things like that, I lean on color psychology quite a bit more and think about what these colors are making people feel, and traditionally like what these colors are doing, right? So red, is like stop, like stoplights, right? So stop, hold up, danger, urgent, things like that. Whereas blue is more like an education kind of thing. We think of like caps and gowns, education, TV, like screens, computer screens, things like that. When we think about green, we think about nature, organic growth, outdoor, that kind of thing. So all of these play roles into coming together and building an entire brand.
Yeah. You know what this made me think of? And I've heard this when I worked in the retail space before, is thinking, you already said this about the five senses, but really think you could think about that when you're building your brand on all of
Yeah.
them. If if my brand was in person,
Mhm.
what would it smell like? What's the that does bring the whole vibe. I really like that. That's really cool. Okay. So I was going to ask you, with your brand book, I think that's a great resource for people who are diving into this. I feel like you have it really laid out. Everything we've basically talked about so far, they could work through this in their own workbook.
Mhm.
What else is in there? What else would you like to share about that brand book?
Yeah. So the other stuff that's in the brand book is a lot of what we've kind of worked through, finding out your mission statement, how we, figure out who your audience is, and then how you can pull your audience to make sure that you are like in the right place. So, say you have a large audience and you're thinking about rebranding, you're thinking about adding another element into your business. How can you reach out and ask your audience for some of their responses to make sure that you're like in the right place and you have the right people already attracted to what's going on? um, Really nailing down your why you're in business, why you do what you do, who you're serving, and all of that kind of helps you when you're starting to market yourself and you're starting to get out there and develop some of those um, strategies in marketing and how you're going to put yourself out there to attract these certain people. I also talk about social media because I think in this day and age, we really have to think about social media and what our brands look like on social media. Not only that, but we have to keep connecting with people. We have to keep connecting with audience members. And again, as things are innovating and changing, we have to do the same thing. So maybe the way you advertise, even 10 years ago isn't the same way we're going to advertise today. So I dive into social media a little bit. And then, we just, that's a lot of it. So it doesn't go into the um, actually building out logos or building out graphics or colors and things like that. I'm considering creating a course that people can go through, and it's a DIY course where I basically walk them through it step by step and kind of share some of the resources you could use to build a logo, and build a brand. And like I said, it really, to me, it's this thing where it's like, I, this is my profession and this is what I do and this is what I'm like passionate about is branding your business for a multitude of reasons. But I don't think that you should DIY your business and your brand in your business unless you fully understand like what's going on and what's happening. Um, Oli's favorite phrase that he says to me is like, it never pays to be cheap. And that's exactly it. If you're DIYing your brand to cut costs or, because you really just can't afford it, and never pays to be cheap, you're going to end up spending money in the long run. Sometimes it's going to cost even more money because people are going to have to redo what you did, whether that's website or social media pages, or you're just going to have to scrape what you've done in the past. And if you have like merchandise that's branded with that old brand, or you have stuff like that, you're going to have to scrape all those costs. So it never really pays to be cheap. And the other thing is like, if that's not your area of expertise, that's okay. Like I said, like I'm not a nurse. I'm not about to stitch myself up. That's okay for me to like go to the ER. I'm not a marketer either. So I've reached out to Rachel plenty of times to be like, hey, like I need help in this place, or I have a client who needs some, marketing help, and that's not my expertise, and that's okay. So I reach out for help. I think the other thing to consider when we're talking about DIYing, and if it's for the reason to cut costs or you really can't afford it, is that people are always willing to trade. I've worked on trades before too, where I shoot some video for people and I ask them to take branding shot like headshots of me so I can use those on social or and other marketing and advertising aspects. Or whether you have a tangible product or a service that you offer, always throw that out like, hey, would you be willing to work on trades? And if somebody says no, that's okay. Like, then you just find somebody who's a good fit for you. If it's a good fit and it's willing to work out with somebody, I'm sure that they'll be welcome to trade whatever your good or service is.
Yeah, for sure. And I think too, we got to remember no right now doesn't mean no forever. Maybe
Yes.
eventually you will get to work with that person when, when you can get there. Okay, so I have two final thoughts. My first final thought is, and we've all heard the quote, people don't remember what you say, they remember how they made you feel. And I think that ties in directly to branding and what branding means. So that's my final thought on branding. Brenna, do you have any final thoughts or things I should have asked you that I didn't?
Um, I have a lot. I always have lots of thoughts on like branding. Branding your business is so important in my eyes because if you're walking out with a brandless business, or you're always changing it, and you have five different variations of a logo and none of them look the same, and you're using different fonts every time you're going on, or there are options out there that help you create social graphics for your business. If you're using those every time and it always looks different, you're confusing people. And if you confuse, you lose. You don't gain new clients, you don't gain new customers, you don't make more money by confusing people. So having a well-crafted brand strategy and brand guidelines to adhere by in your business is really going to help you in the long run. And a lot of people don't believe me or think it seems silly when I equate that to making more money, but it's so true. A well-branded business makes more money. Like Nike makes more money than the local shoe store. Why do you think that is? They're well branded, they're established, they've been out there, people see the swoosh, they know it's Nike. Like, it's creating that brand recognition and creating a consistent and balanced brand that really is going to attract more people and make you more money and get you more clients. And that's just kind of the bottom line. So when it comes to DIYing, it seems like it's something so simple, and you're like, well, I can make a logo, or my friend's cousin's brother sister-in-law can make a logo. Like, that's just not the case. So do some research, see what brand designers are out there, and people are always willing to answer your questions or hop on a call with you. I offer free consult calls that I'll do with people to say like, hey, are we a good fit together? Are we going to work well together or not? And if we don't, that's okay. um, but there's always people out there to kind of like reach out and say, hey, this is what I'm thinking. Do you think this is necessary in my business? And when it comes to branding is always necessary.
Love it. How can people get your brand book?
you can go to my website. It's becreativebybrenna.com. I have a hard copy version that I ship out to you, and I also have a downloaded version that you can just download straight to your computer. If you are more of a digital person, you can go ahead and do that. So yeah, it's listed there. And like I said, I'm really playing with the idea of creating a course. So if you're interested in creating a course, follow me on Instagram. It's at Brenna Ramsden, and shoot me a message. I would love to hear what you think and if that's something you're interested in. Again, that would be a full, here's the strategy behind it, here's how we're building your brand, and then kind of walking you through the steps of how to actually build out a logo, how to use fonts together, how to pair things, how to use colors, and kind of the whole strategy and psychology behind all of that.
That sounds like a fabulous resource. Thanks for sharing that. And you heard it here first that we might be getting a new course. That's going to be really exciting and super helpful. Thanks for sharing all your branding expertise. I know we kind of have in the works some even more branding episodes to come. So stay tuned. Make sure to review our podcast and follow us on social media at Rural Rundown. Hope you guys have a great day.
Well, that's it for this episode of the Rural Rundown podcast.
Thanks for listening. You can always find us on social media at the Rural Rundown.
And if you really liked this episode, we would totally love it if you gave us a review and gave us a little rating.
It would mean so much to us. And for more small town roots and business savvy, catch us on the next one.